Joining us for more on the missing AirAsia jet is Captain Mark Weiss. He's a former American Airlines pilot and a member of the Spectrum Group, a defense and government consulting group here in Alexandria, Virginia. And Mark, thanks so much for coming in. We've talked to you in the past after MH370.
Yes.
Take us into the cockpit. What was going on with the pilot? I mean, given the information that you have, give us your best estimation of what happened prior to the event and what is likely to have happened.
Well, let's start back before the flight even took off, back on the ground. The pilot would have gotten a flight plan and weather updates and a briefing as to what type of weather you would be encountering along your route of flight, and whether or not you would need alternates or whether or not it's penetrable, and it would have to be if the airline sent you in that direction. But as a pilot, what I'm thinking about is, what's the ride going to be like? Do I have enough fuel? What if I can't get the altitude I want and I have to burn more fuel? What if the weather closes in on me? What are my options? So even before I've pushed back from the gate, I'm already thinking about what my options are to make this a safe flight and get my passengers, who you have to consider them as family to you, how am I going to get everybody safely from A to B?
Your thoughts on what happened? Did it stall? I mean, what happened, do you think?
You know, it's all speculative. It really is at this time. But my thinking would be that, and I base this upon past accidents. We've all talked about the Air France 447, the Asiana aircraft that was crashed in San Francisco. What I'm thinking is that this aircraft was trying to climb through some of the weather. Now, the tops in those clouds, we've heard it topping at 53 or 4,000 feet. And this aircraft was trying to climb into the high 30s. Typically, on an aircraft, what you'll do is you'll go for a turbulence penetration speed. So you're going to slow the airplane down. And the reason you do that is if you make the analogy of being in a car and you're going over, say, railroad ties, if you go over them very fast, you know you're going to get a lot of jolting action. If you slow down, and you're still going to get bounced around a little bit, but it's not as rough a ride. So you're going to slow that down. So you do the same thing on an aircraft so that the aircraft takes the ride better and that's transmitted to the passengers as a smoother ride. So you'd slow the aircraft down. If he was climbing, and again, I don't know if he actually climbed, but if he had slowed the aircraft down and perhaps started to climb, if the aircraft didn't come back with some more power when they initiated the climb, then what happens is the aircraft gets to be too slow. And remember, when you have thunderstorm activity like this, you oftentimes have hail and icing, depending on what the freezing level is. So that's another consideration. So the aircraft very possibly could have stalled where there's not enough lift generated by the wings to keep the aircraft flying. And the aircraft typically would fall off on a wing and start to spiral down or go down. And now what you're doing as a pilot, you're really trying to interpret your instruments and trying to fight that airplane to get it back to a level position. And one of the things that's come out of Air France, and Asiana actually, is that pilots don't often have the training necessary to understand and interpret the instruments properly. I'm an old retired stick and rudder pilot, and so when we learned to fly, and the airline that I flew for would actually turn off all the automation, put you into different positions, and make you recover that airplane. So what you had to do is now you had to actually think about what you're looking at and interpret that for actually what the airplane was telling you.
Let me ask one final question before we have to move on. You brought up Air France, which crashed off of Brazil. It took a long time to find it. We've seen what happened with MH370, and we've talked about how this is a needle in the haystack. They're broadening the scope now where they're looking. How long can this take?
Well, first of all, it shouldn't be taking that long to begin with. Since MH370, you know, this is criminal that we don't have that streaming device on aircraft any longer. Hopefully this should be resolved in a much shorter period of time because the transponders weren't turned off, the ACARs were still working, you had radar data on this. So I think, you know, they're honing in on a search area rather than just in 370, there was just, it could be anywhere. Right. So I think this is going to be a lot shorter.
Mark Weiss, always a delight talking to you. I wish it was under better circumstances. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.